It's officially July, which means we are just over halfway through 2023. And as such, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to share my favorite movies so far this year? So here we are, my top 10 favorite movies of 2023, at least the first half. At this point, I've seen somewhere around 25 or so new movies in theaters, so I definitely had a fair bit to pull from. And of course, this list is going to be completely biased. This is my own personal opinion on the movies I had the most fun watching. If that kind of thing sounds cool to you and you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out in theaters and at home, make sure you subscribe. Coming in at number 10 is a movie I actually just saw a couple weeks ago, and it is the R-rated raunchy adult comedy starring Jennifer Lawrence in what I think is her first comedic role, a movie called No Hard Feelings. This movie has a pretty questionable premise. Jennifer Lawrence is playing someone in their 30s who is hired to date a 19-year-old son of a very rich family. Basically, he's super awkward and he's going off to college, and so they want him to get laid before he does. So a very questionable concept, but the movie itself is a lot of fun. It's very funny, and it has a fair bit of heart. You have Andrew Barth Feldman, who is playing the son of this rich family, and he, I believe, is most known for being on Broadway, and you really get to see him shine in this movie. He is incredibly talented and just a really likable actor. So I'm excited to see what else he decides to do in the future. Also, seeing Jennifer Lawrence lean into her comedic side is great. It makes you wonder why she hasn't done this before. And as far as it being an adult, raunchy, rated R comedy, it is definitely, but not as hardcore as a lot of the movies that you might think of in that kind of realm. It's definitely a lot more tame, but there is a nude scene in this movie that is hilarious and very much unexpected. I won't spoil it just because I think it's something that you should see if this is the type of movie you'd be interested in. But yes, coming in at number 10, just making its way onto my list, is Jennifer Lawrence in No Hard Feelings. And now we pull a full 180 for my number 9 on the list. In ninth place is a Disney remake of a classic children's movie, and that is the new Little Mermaid film. This was a movie that I was not looking forward to, straight up. A lot of the Disney live action remakes I just haven't really enjoyed all that much. You know, Aladdin is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time, if not my favorite Disney movie, and the remake for that, it was okay, but it just really felt unnecessary. And so going into The Little Mermaid, I was worried that this was just going to be another one of those okay remakes that are ultimately unnecessary. And I think they did a really good job with this one. Halle Bailey, who plays Ariel in the movie, is fantastic. She's so good in this role. Not only is she an incredible singer, not only is her voice amazing, but just the way that she brings across the character, that kind of innocence and that curiosity that Ariel has in the animated movie, she really kind of brings that across. There are a couple weak points throughout the movie. I think Javier Bardem wasn't really what I was looking for in a King Triton. And there's a couple of extra music scenes that they throw in, which I think are originally from the Broadway performance that I feel like they could have done without. The movie runs definitely a bit long, so it's not a perfect film by any means, but as far as what we've gotten with Disney live action remakes, this one is probably the best that we've seen so far. And if they can maintain this level of quality going forward, then maybe there's some hope for this whole concept. I think they're working on a Moana remake, which I feel like is too soon, but if they're able to maintain this level, then I guess go for it. Okay, coming in at number 8 is another Disney movie, oddly enough. There's actually quite a few Disney movies on this list. This one, though, is a Disney Pixar movie called Elemental. It's really interesting because as a Pixar film, this is not one of the best ones that we've gotten. And in fact, I feel like a lot of people would agree that it's kind of a middling Pixar film. But when you're a studio like Pixar, a middling Pixar film is an amazing film for any other studio. If this was DreamWorks or any other animated studio, we would be looking at Elemental as one of the greats. It's beautifully animated. What they do with the water creatures and the fire creatures are so unique and interesting, and I would imagine very difficult to render. And the story, although it's kind of simple, it's a rom-com, and actually Pixar's first ever rom-com. And it's also kind of a other side of the track story, an immigrant story about two different people from different walks of life that come together. So it's all stuff that we've kind of seen before, but it's told in a very interesting and different way. And it's also just got a lot of that charm that we love from a lot of Pixar movies. The two main characters in it are fantastic and just really likable. So if you're looking for something that the entire family can enjoy together, this does not disappoint. Is it one of the best Pixar movies? No, I don't think so, but it's certainly not one of the worst. And it makes its way onto my list at number 8. Now, coming in at number 7 is a movie that wasn't actually released in theaters, but it was so good that I had to kind of bend the rules of my list here in order to put it on it. This was a Netflix exclusive sequel starring Chris Hemsworth called Extraction 2. Now, if you're not familiar with the Extraction franchise at this point, now there's 2 movies in it. These films are produced by Joe Russo, who is, of course, of Joe and Anthony Russo, a couple of brothers who have directed and produced a number of films, including the Captain America Winter Soldier movie, Avengers, Endgame, Infinity War. But here, it's not being directed by them. It's being produced by them and directed by Sam Hargrave, who is a stunt performer and stunt choreographer who's been in the industry for decades at this point. And he's proving to be a really talented director, especially with a stunt-heavy, action-heavy film like this one. You know, the first Extraction came out in 2020, I believe, so during the pandemic on Netflix, and it really kind of blew up there. And so they took everything that we loved from that first movie and just took it to a whole new level in this one. There's a scene where Chris Hemsworth is fighting in a prison and he's on fire, and it's actually Chris Hemsworth on fire. This is what those of us who are action purists love about action movies. It's not super CG heavy where everything is fake and green screen, although I'm sure they do use plenty of special effects in the movie, but it's real people performing real stunts and real fight scenes and really putting themselves in harm's way. So if you're looking for just an action-packed thrill ride that you can watch at home on your couch, definitely check out Extraction and its, what I think, better sequel, Extraction 2. Okay, coming in at number 6, we move into the world of horror with the latest installment in the Evil Dead franchise, Evil Dead Rise. I really like the Evil Dead franchise of movies. You know, they do a really good job of blending in horror and comedy, but this movie in particular is heavy into the horror elements with only dashes of comedy here and there. You definitely have all of the nods to the original Evil Dead films, whether it's the Book of the Dead or the Deadites or any of the little things that you might have appreciated about those earlier films. And in this one, we go so heavy into just over the top gore and brutal scenes that I won't even describe in this video because I don't want to freak you out. The cast is fantastic. The lady who plays the mother, as well as the lady who plays the aunt in this movie, first off, they totally look like they could be sisters. But aside from that, they're both phenomenal in their roles. As well as the kids, there's a number of kid actors in this movie, and they also do a really good job. This is without a doubt the goriest, the scariest, the most brutal movie in the entire franchise. And if you're into horror at all, or like me, I'm not super into horror, but I can stomach it, if you can, this is a great movie to check out. Definitely, in my opinion, the best horror movie of the year. Okay, coming in at number 5 is the movie that has been getting a lot of heat, but I really enjoyed it when I saw it in theaters, and that is the latest DCEU movie, The Flash. Now, a lot of people have been kind of crapping on this movie. The CG elements in it were really subpar in a lot of ways, and there's definitely a ton of fan service, but honestly, that's kind of what I want out of a DC movie at this point. So many of them are just so dark and dreary and heavy. It's nice to just get a fun, goofy adventure that does still have some weight. There are definitely moments in this movie that are sad and pull at your heartstrings. But from the very beginning of it, you're seeing the Flash, Barry Allen, do some wild, ridiculous, over-the-top things. There's really cool slow motion sequences that they have when he's using his Speed Force. It does what I feel like superhero movies should do fundamentally, and that is it's fun. Aside from that, it's cool to see some of the nods to older DC movies. I'm sure we all know there's a number of cameos of actors and actresses that you may be familiar with from prior movies and TV shows in the DC world. So it's cool to get all of that nostalgia, all of that fan service wrapped up in a movie that is fun and exciting and interesting. Now, is it perfect? No, definitely not. It has a number of flaws, but I think it's one of the better DCEU films that we've gotten. I should also mention before we move on here, I have reviewed most of the movies on this list. So if you want to see my full review of any of them, go ahead and jump down to the description box below. I will link all of the reviews there for you. Also, this channel is pretty small right now, so we don't have any sponsors other than you clicking on and watching these videos. So if you want to support the channel further, go ahead and drop a like on the video or comment down below and let me know what your favorite movies are of the year. Okay, coming in at number 4 is another action adventure movie, the 4th in the franchise, and that is John Wick Chapter 4. Now, if you haven't seen any of the John Wick movies, you are missing out. If you're a fan of action movies, not unlike Extraction that we talked about before, John Wick is the cream of the crop when it comes to that kind of movie. Really, each and every one so far has been fantastic, and this 4th installment takes it to an entirely new level. It's a very long movie, but it kind of has to be. There's so much in it. It's so jam-packed with crazy action sequences that even though it may feel a bit long, it's totally worth sitting through all the way. And again, like we talked about with Extraction, John Wick Chapter 4 is being directed by another stunt performer, stunt choreographer who's been in the industry for a very long time. His name name is Chad Stileski, and he was actually the double for Keanu Reeves in, I believe, the Matrix movie. So it's kind of cool that he's able to reunite with him here, this time as a director. And they have this franchise that has gone on to be so incredibly successful. So John Wick Chapter 4, in my opinion, the best in the franchise thus far, and definitely something you have to see if you're into action movies at all. And this is where it gets a little fun. Coming in at number 4 was John Wick Chapter 4. Coming in at number 3 is Creed 3. I swear I didn't plan it like this. It just so happened to work out that way. And again, I want to reiterate, these are my favorite movies of the year. I'm not saying these are necessarily critically the best films of the year, but for me and my personal taste, Creed 3 was amazing. I've always been a fan of the Rocky movies ever since I was a little kid, and I wasn't entirely sold on what they were doing with the Creed franchise in the past 2 films, but with this one, you have Michael B. Jordan taking over as director for the first time ever, and he's able to implement a lot of his influences, specifically when it comes to anime. So I'm a big anime fan, if you can't tell by some of the things behind me on the walls and on the bed, but it's really cool to see someone who's so clearly influenced by anime taking that into a major blockbuster film. I know some people didn't necessarily love some of the fight scenes in Creed 3 because of that anime influence, but I thought they were awesome. I love what they did with it. It really increases the drama of what's going on. And it's just cool to see certain shots that you're like, oh, I know that from Dragon Ball, or I know that from Naruto, or from Hajime no Ippo. So for me, as a diehard anime fan, it was really cool to see all of that. Although I did have one little nitpick, which is in my review of the movie. So if you want to watch that again, I'll link it below for you. But Michael B. Jordan did get something factually wrong in Creed 3. But again, you got to watch my review for that. Okay, we're in the top 2 now. This is where it's probably going to get a little controversial. My second favorite movie of 2023, or the first half of 2023, is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, I know a lot of you are probably saying, how is this not your number 1 pick? Don't get me wrong. I love Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It is a gorgeous movie, and honestly one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen, flat out. The characters are amazing. The storytelling is so interesting and unique. The art is mind-blowing in some of the scenes, in a lot of the scenes, to be fair. And I can't wait to see what happens in the next installment. But the problem I have with this movie is that it is not a complete movie. It doesn't have an ending. And I know, oh, it's a cliffhanger. Movies can have cliffhangers. Totally. I absolutely agree with that. But there's a difference between ending on a cliffhanger and just not ending. And in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, unfortunately, it does that in a bad way. Now, again, aside from that, I love everything about this movie, so that's why it's so high up on my list. But I couldn't, in good conscience, put it at number 1 because of the glaring flaw there. And again, this list is not the most visually impressive or the most expertly crafted film of 2023. It's just my favorites. So if Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is your favorite movie, definitely let me know in the comments. But for me, coming in at number 1 is a movie that I was looking forward to so much, and it had such an opportunity to not live up to my expectations, but somehow it did. Somehow it was as good as I was hoping it would be, and so much better. And that is, believe it or not, at my favorite movie of 2023 for the first half, Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. That's right. Now, just as much as I am a fan of anime, as I mentioned before, I am also a huge fan of Dungeons & Dragons. And there have been a number of D&D movies that have come out in the past, none of which have been very good. So I was definitely worried going into this one. But after watching it in theaters with some friends, it's one of those movies that as soon as I left the theater, I felt like I wanted to go back and rewatch it again. And there are only a select few films that I've had that experience with. One of them more recently was Everything Everywhere All at Once. So if that tells you the quality of movie, or at least the quality or level of my enjoyment of that movie, it's very, very high. I think Chris Pine is phenomenal in this flick. I think a lot of people don't have him high up on their list of Hollywood Chris's, but for me, he's one of the best. Really, everyone in this movie is great. Regé-Jean Page is hilarious in his role. There are so many scenes with his character that just had me busting out laughing. Sophia Lillis and Justice Smith, their characters together, also hilarious. Michelle Rodriguez just tugging at your heartstrings through this movie. It's just so good in so many ways, and it does one of the things that I really appreciate when it comes to movies is that it creates a world that you just want to spend time in. And this movie does it so well. I hope that they make a sequel to it. I just want to revisit this world and spend more time with these characters. And for me, that's the best thing a movie can do. And Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves does it wonderfully. So it had to be my number 1 pick so far for this year, but we still got 6 months left to go. So will all of these or any of these movies remain on my top 10 list for the rest of the year? Well, if you want to find that out, you're gonna have to make sure you subscribe. And again, this is just my list, my ranking of my favorite movies. Let me know yours in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. I'd be really curious to see if you have a completely different list than I do. There were a bunch of movies that have come out so far this year, so I'm sure there's plenty that are gonna be on your list that might not be on mine. Also, again, make sure you check out the description box for all the reviews for these movies. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one. All right. Be good.